Welcome to the 3030 Health Podcast. The following discussion is for education and entertainment. It is not intended to diagnose or treat disease. Please do not apply any of this information without first discussing it with your doctor. Here is your host, Dr. Ruiz.
Hello everyone, my guest today is Dr. Ben Lynch. Dr. Lynch received his cell and molecular biology BS from the University of Washington and his doctorate of naturopathic medicine from Bastyr University. His passion for identifying the cause of disease directed him towards nutrigenomics and methylation dysfunction. Currently, he researches, writes, and presents worldwide on the topic of MTHFR, methylation defects, and genetic controls. But before we get into the interview, remember this batch of PaleoFX tickets will close February the 16th. These tickets will not be at this price anymore, so make sure to grab a ticket. If you want to learn more about PaleoFX, visit my website. That's 3030strong.com. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello everyone, super excited for this show today. I've been a fan of Dr. Ben Lynch for a very long time and finally, somehow convinced him to be in my show. So, Dr. Lynch, how are you?
Hey, pleasure to be here, Guillermo.
So we met at AHS, you had a great talk, we have mutual friends, and now I heard you wrote a book.
I did.
So what a great time to have you here, but for anyone that doesn't know about your work and how influential you've been in the health space, why don't you give us your hero story?
A hero story, wow. I wouldn't put myself on that pedestal, but I'll definitely say that life is always a journey, right? And it's taking you to new adventures always. And so I guess basically got started on this because I am the type of person that really likes to understand the why behind things. I mean, I'm always digging for why. I was probably that annoying little kid to my parents. Why? And so in the hunt for why, I was watching a video one day, and it was about these mice, and they were susceptible to diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. Some mice got it and some of them didn't, but they're genetically identical. I was like, wait a minute, rewind. I watched again, genetically identical, split into two groups. One group got them, the other group didn't. The only intervention was nutrition. That was it. And I was like, so you telling me that our genes aren't our destiny anymore? And that's what it basically was. And ever since there, I was super excited about that because I always thought genes were our destiny. And then I realized that they weren't.
It's funny that what you just said, that genes are not our destiny, it's upsetting to me. And I don't get mad and punch anyone, but it like eats at my soul anytime I have someone tell me, oh, my hormone levels are great, my uric acid levels, my CBC and my CMP are fine. My cholesterol is a little elevated, but that's hereditary, I have a family history of hypertension, so I don't need any medication, I don't need any intervention, I don't need to change. I'm healthy. Could you explain to people why, if a marker like your lipids is a little bit elevated, that doesn't necessarily mean that you just got the family curse of hypercholesterolemia, and the difference between like an overt person with familial hypercholesterolemia and your regular person that is not eating an optimal diet and has a little bit of elevation, but just enough to make us worried.
Yeah, well, there's always two sides to the coin on that one. One, there is, oh, poor me, it must be genetic, and you know what? Since it's genetic, I can't do anything about it, so I'm going to go on through my life and continue doing what I'm doing. You have to ask yourself, is that favorable to them? Is that what they're looking for? Are they looking for that excuse? So does it serve them well? And then the other side of the coin is, well, it must be genetic. It does make me nervous. I kind of like to figure out, what else I can do about this, but I do feel like I am sentenced, but I'm motivated to change it. So, right, there's two sides of the coin there when you blame things on your genetics. Now, in terms of elevated cholesterol, there are genes which increase susceptibility to that, as you brought up. Familial hypercholesterolemia can be a genetic issue. But, I would say for the majority of the population, it's not. And I also want to say that the majority of the population is being confused about what healthy cholesterol is as well. The lower the better, not so fast. So, there is a lot of reasons why people can have high cholesterol. So if your knee-jerk reaction is to say, "Oh, my mom had it, my dad had it, my aunts and uncles have it," okay, well, maybe they did, but there's still a lot of things that you can do.
It's not a race to the bottom. It's not like let's see how low we can get your cholesterol, because cholesterol is needed for many physiological things. But what about the other side where, you have someone with like 280, 300? When do you start getting worried about high cholesterol? When do you start looking at genetics and making interventions to correct those elevated levels?
Well, you're starting to hit some good numbers there, and I would just always start. I always start at the fundamentals. Always. I always look at sleep, lifestyle, diet, mindset, exercise, nutrition, environmental exposures. I always look at all these things. So, and if the numbers are coming down, and they will with some of these basics, absolutely. A lot of people discredit them because they're so simple, but it's amazing what they do. And a lot of people also think that high cholesterol is because we're consuming fat. Well, not really. Your cholesterol can be, going up because of your carbohydrate sources, and that's usually where it comes from. And I'll be looking at hormones as well, and mitochondrial function, and so on. So I'd be doing a lot to play with these numbers. And I'd also be looking at a cholesterol fractionation test, or a VAP, advanced cholesterol panel, which most people don't do. Are they fluffy? Are they not fluffy? Are the lipoprotein little a, is that elevated? That's where it starts getting dangerous. So if the numbers are coming down, but they're still not coming down as fast as I would like them to, then, I'd say, well, let's look at your genes here, and maybe by looking at your genetics, I can see if you have a susceptibility to high cholesterol. And if you do, then we can have a more of a knowledge where your body has a susceptibility to it, and nurture that specific target more effectively without guessing. So, I only like to steer towards genetic testing when I feel I'm up against the wall a little bit, when the fundamentals don't work.
Couple of things you hit there. First of all, I want to mention to my listeners that your lipid panel, your standard lipid panel, basically they take all your lipids in your blood, they count how many HDL molecules there are, and then they make an inference of that the rest is going to be LDL. And that's how your normal lipid panel works. So if you have lab results around you, look at your lab results, and if it says you have, I'm gonna make the number simple, 200 total cholesterol and 50 HDL, let's assume that 150 of the rest is LDL, period, the end. That gives you some good information, but not perfect information. And for someone that is at risk of having high cholesterol, that's when Dr. Lynch mentions a more specific test that takes the LDL and then it fractionates it into different sizes. And when he mentions fluffy versus, sand-like, that sand-like cholesterol is what gets into the intima of your arteries, and that's what creates damage, and that's what creates blockage. It's funny that I'm talking to the genius of genetic testing, and basically, towards the end, when he's throwing his hands in the air, that's when he starts looking at genetic testing. Same thing with like organic acid testing. Same thing with like this very sometimes expensive testing that, we hear a lot about. But if you haven't activated the essentials, if you haven't gone in and done a paleo or ancestral diet, if you're not sleeping, if you're super stressed, what percentage of the population would you think that these fundamentals are going to be super effective? 100%?
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, 100%, the fundamentals will provide some improvement, and some it'll provide 100% improvement. Others will provide 80%. Others will provide 50%. Others will provide 20%. Anytime you get a 20% result out of something in medicine or of anything, that's pretty significant. So if you got a 20% return on your investments, at the end of the year, you'd be like, woohoo, right?
Yeah.
So, there's always improvements. And the thing with genetic testing is it's a very powerful tool. That's it. It's a tool. So, lately it's one of those things where everybody is running to genetic testing now because one, it's new, it's fun, it's curious, it's interesting, it's fascinating, and it can be targeted. But the problem, like you said, you can get lost in the weeds. So, if you're out there looking for something in the forest and you have your heart set on a certain pine cone and you're cruising through the forest and you're looking for this one pine cone, at some point you won't even see the forest and the beautiful nature that you're around there. You go there because you want to enjoy the forest, but you also want to find this pine cone, and the pine cone is not really the destination, right? The forest is the destination. So people get lost in their genetic testing looking for that specific target. What is, singular, what is causing my problem, or what is causing my disease? And the question should always be, what are the current reasons for the dysfunctions that I have? I don't even call them symptoms really anymore. I call them dysfunctions because the body is inherently brilliant. It's not like our body's broken, Guillermo. Our body's not broken. Our body is responding in the way it should respond given the things that we're giving it. So you cannot blame your body. The only person you can blame is yourself, really. That's pretty harsh, but it's pretty true.
And that's the difference between feeling like a victim or feeling empowered. And I rather feel empowered. And it's the difference between symptoms or maladaptations. And what Dr. Lynch is talking about is maladaptations. How, like, for example, if you have a kid that has overt symptomatic picture of attention deficit disorder, the maladaptation is that he is put into a classroom and he's told to sit down and stay in that seat and don't move and given, skim milk and cereal for breakfast, and he cannot control himself. That's a maladaptation to the environment of that kid. And if you were to take that kid and take him out to the woods and give him a task to find that pine cone, he probably would be the best kid to do it because he would be able to use his genetics and this ADHD type personality to be curious and put it into use and actually be very effective. But because we are caging these kids into this environment, they are acting up or whatever you want to call it. And that's what Dr. Lynch is talking about. He's talking about maladaptations, the correct response to the environment for someone that has a phenotype.
Yeah, let me share a story on that. So, I coach basketball, and there's a number of kids on the team that are really chatty and not paying attention, and they struggle at practice. Let me put it that way. And they run for it. But what I've learned is, one, we get to practice, and we do a lot of running in the beginning. You sprint with the ball. You do a lot of crossovers. You tire yourself out a bit. And then you learn plays at the end of practice, and then they focus better. If I'm teaching them plays at the beginning of practice and they have all this energy, then they're going to be wanting to move, and that's a problem. So if I get their energy out fast first and I allow them to move earlier, then they focus and I don't have to get mad at them. So I could be there and I could be that coach that makes the kids run constantly, or I could figure out ways to say, okay, well, how can I get these kids to focus better? And so I just made a slight shift in how I ran the practice, and it works. In game time, when it's more intense, these kids don't need any pay attention during the game. They're on it. It's fast, it's active, and they're in the middle of it. They're thriving. So it's like you said, the environment is really important here. And I want to go back to Guillermo when I said it really is up to the individual for these choices, and it is to improve yourself. Sometimes these choices don't seem evident to us, right? We feel that something really bad, really significantly bad happened to us by someone else in our past, and that's awful. I can't even imagine. I'm fortunate that never happened to me, and I feel for that situation. And there's a choice in which to address that and move forward through your life. That happened and it was awful, absolutely awful. But you still need to make the choice to move forward for yourself, for your own benefit. Don't live in that past horrific moment of your life and ruin the rest of it because of that. And you're letting that person win for you as well, right? Having them impact your entire life that way. So I encourage people to step forward and address it however they need to address it. And Dr. Keisha addresses these things about abuse and so on. So that's a real issue that a lot of people don't discuss with their doctor, but it's one I really encourage people do to reach out and find someone they trust for these types of situations.
I ask, what was your hero story? Because I think that with the convergence in this paleo ancestral movement is that we were sick, we had a question, we had something that wasn't sitting right with us. And we self-motivated individuals that appear on interviews on podcasts have the ability to stand up and find these answers. But what about the other people that don't have that type A, or they have a different set of skills that are as important as, dummies like me who went to medical school, and they have a traumatic event and they don't have the ability to pull themselves for the bootstraps because they don't have any bootstraps. For those people, seek help. There are people out there that can help you get yourself up and dust off, and it's not your fault. It's not just, toughen up, kiddo. It's more like seek help. You are the one that's going to move that piece that is going to make you healthier.
Well said. And there's individuals that say, well, I've sought help and it didn't work. Well, keep going. Dr. Keisha on Facebook, you can find her. She talks about ACEs, adverse childhood events. And so basically she said looking for a counselor or a therapist or whatever you want to call it is like going to the store and trying on a pair of shoes. And I thought that was really interesting. So if you sought that out at some point, try a different one. It's the same thing for a doctor. You bring your genetic test to a doctor and they give you some stuff and you don't feel like it worked, try another one. You have to find the pair of shoes that fits for you and supports you. And that's how it is for everything. I mean, that's how it is with food. That's how it is with your environment. That's how it is with your significant other, for everything. So, that's how I like to look at it.
It's really frustrating when, for example, me, I was super excited, about this new lifestyle when, back in 2008, 2009, when I started eating more ancestral way, and I started eating a ton of coconut oil, and I saw my lipids go up. And then I was like, I was making excuses for why my lipids were going up. Oh, it's normal, you want more cholesterol. And I made the switch from coconut oil to olive oil, and my lipids normalized. Just switching from saturated fat to a monounsaturated fat made the whole difference. And the same thing with like doctors, the same thing with supplements, the same thing with different habits. Maybe intermittent fasting is good for a bunch of people, but it might not be the thing for you. Maybe coconut oil is not the thing for you. Maybe taking a lot of supplements is not the thing for you. Find a doctor that can help you figure out what interventions, no matter how healthy or beneficial they're touted, are not beneficial to you. And that's very important in you seeking for help. Now, it's a perfect segue to talk about the darling of the genetic medicine, MTHFR. In the most abbreviated way, how would you explain to someone in an elevator what a MTHFR mutation does to you?
So what MTHFR does to you is really nothing. I mean, it's a gene that has a function, so it doesn't do anything to you. It does something for you. So that's what I would first do. And I would say that we all know that folic acid is supposed to be helpful for us, and it's not. There's a majority of the population, 50% of us, that have genes which do not respond well to folic acid. And I would actually increase that statement up to probably even 80, 90% of us, because there's other genes that are in the folate pathway that also don't respond favorably to folic acid. So if 90% of the population isn't responding favorably to folic acid, and MTHFR is one of them, and it's a big one, then we need to do something about that. And basically, if MTHFR's job is to make the body's main form of folate in circulation, 80% of folate in our blood is either produced by the MTHFR gene or it's consumed by diet. So, it's a big one. And since MTHFR does that, then the folate that it makes goes on to support 200 other functions in the body, 200 others. So one step, this gene does one thing, and its job is to make methylfolate. That's all it does. And that methylfolate then goes on to support a process that does 200 other things that are very, very essential in your life every single day, their entire life for you. That's a big, big thing.
So from detoxification to creating choline to creatine and all of these different pathways. Back in, I guess for as long as I've been around, it has been encouraged that mothers take folic acid while they're pregnant to prevent neural tube defects. And you make a very strong argument that folic acid is not what's needed, but actually folate. Now, I was talking to Chris Masterjohn a couple of weeks ago, and he says, well, having any form of folic acid is better than having none. And then, the next step would be, supplementing with folate. Because in the United States of America, most of our folic acid comes from grains. And when you do a paleo lifestyle or an ancestral, a lot of times you shun grains. So now you have an overt deficiency for folate.
Yeah, and Chris has a point. If I was stuck on a desert island and there were no leafy green vegetables and there's no folate, I would take folic acid.
And you had a bottle of folic acid.
Yeah, but I would do it very reluctantly, but I would take it. And even if we have no genetic problems in the folate pathway at all, Guillermo, let's say our genes in folate processing are perfectly fine, right? Humming along. Well, the most that we can utilize at any one time of folic acid is 200 micrograms. Okay, 200 micrograms. So if you are going to take folic acid, and you have to because of where you live and they don't have folinic acid available, they don't have methylfolate available, the leafy greens are maybe full of pesticides and herbicides and E. coli, and you don't really want to do that, so you are stuck to taking folic acid. Well, here's how you take folic acid. The best way you can is you take 200 micrograms at a time, and you take it probably every few hours. So, I would take 200 micrograms in the morning, and then I would probably take 200 micrograms in the afternoon. And let's say if you need to take a milligram, then you would just space it out through your day. You don't take a milligram at once. You take it 200 micrograms at a time, because the gene that processes your folic acid is very, very slow at it. So just do it that way, and you won't have as many issues.
So what issues would you have if you were over supplementing with folic acid?
A lot of people think that if you swallow a vitamin or a mineral or any supplement, it just automatically will get into the system and away you go, right? It's just not how it works. I mean, people do understand that vitamin B12 is pretty tough. You need stomach acid, you need carrier proteins, you need receptors available, it needs to become methylated and so on. So that's one aspect. In terms of folate, you take folic acid, it has to go through, I'm looking at my pathway here, it needs to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different steps to become methylfolate. And then it has to be transported by proteins. And it has to be then delivered to a receptor. So it has to get all that done. And what folic acid will do is it will bind preferentially to our transport proteins, and if it's taken in too high amounts, and it will then also sit on the folate receptors, and that will then bring in nonsense folate into the cell. And so now we have a functional folate deficiency, where on the lab it looks like you have a normal folate, but you really don't. You have a folate that's not performing for you. So it's a big problem.
Just recently, I had a patient that was using cyanocobalamin, and that their MCV, the mean corpuscular volume of the cells, was getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's exactly what you're describing. Cyanocobalamin adheres to the receptors of B12. It looks like you have B12 in your system, but it doesn't activate the actual mechanisms needed for the separation of the cells to make them nice and evenly sized. So it's exactly that, a functional deficiency where it looks like you have enough, but functionally it's not activating the pathways that you do. And sometimes I wonder if overconsumption of vitamin D3 might be causing some of that, because there's so many side pathways that are used whenever you convert sunlight into vitamin D. And, in clinical practice, I try to keep my patients at a good level of vitamin D, but I don't like to just supplement. I like to put them at a good level just to ensure that they have enough vitamin D. And then I try to convince them to get some sunlight and try to create their own vitamin D, because those pathways have not been studied. So who knows what we're missing by just supplementing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the vitamin D pathway I've drawn out the pathway of research vitamin D pretty extensively, and it's not easy to generate your own vitamin D and to get it activated. There's a lot of things in there, especially with our modern day lifestyles. And I want to hit the functional deficiencies a little bit more. I think people might be still a bit lost from that. So we all have keys, right? And so have you ever taken a key, Guillermo, and you stuck it in the lock and it just fit perfectly, and you tried to turn it and it wouldn't turn? And you're like, what the heck? It doesn't turn, but it just slid right in there. And have you ever gone to someone's car who looked like your car, and you put the key in the ignition and you tried to, I mean, not the ignition, but the door, and you tried to turn it and it didn't work?
Yeah.
I've done that too. Some guy had a van just like mine in New Zealand. I mean, it was spit and image, exactly like mine. I opened the door and I get in, and I was like, I don't remember this stuff. And then I put the key in the ignition, I tried to turn it, it didn't start. So then I'm trying to fix it and why it won't start. And then a buddy of mine, Chad, is like, that's our car over there. So sometimes, it can look like a duck, smell like a duck, quack like a duck, but it's not exactly a duck. So folic acid does all three very, very well, and it does have some biological benefit. I'll give it that. But it's the least one that I would want to touch. So that's what I would have to say about the functional deficiencies. And I think that's a really important point to hit home, because there are many, many things like this. Carbon monoxide binding to our hemoglobin versus oxygen. We have xenoestrogens, that are toxins, chemicals in the environment versus estrogens. And there's many, many mimics that are affecting our genes and our biochemistry.
I'm gonna talk some shop right now. Some of these nutrients need to be spaced out throughout the day, and the bane of my existence is going to be compliance. For example, like cod liver oil has a lower DHA and EPA content, but I prefer that because our conversion in assimilation into the cells is very slow, and I don't want most of that. If you take 3 grams of EPA and DHA, a lot of that is just going to go up in flames. So I prefer a lower dose. But the constant administration, like you said, with folinic acid, thankfully we have other forms that are going to be better assimilated. How do you convince your patients, or how do you explain to your patients that some of these nutrients have to be taken 3 times a day in order for them to be effective?
Well, it's up to them. It's really up to them. I'll describe why, and I understand that life is busy and we have distractions, and I have distractions as well. And if there is something where you'll get an amazing benefit from it, you'll do it, right? And if you don't do it, even though you'll get an amazing benefit from it, then that's up to you, and it's a choice that you have. It's like, is your life what you're doing right now? If you're supposed to be taking the cod liver oil right now, Is that whatever you're doing more important than you feeling better or getting better? And I think it comes down to values, Guillermo. I mean, it really comes down to values. And Dr. Parthanandi talks about this. Sachin Patel talks about this. Tons of good, solid doctors talk about values. Sean Croxton is another. He's not a doc, but he's a functional nutritionist. And if values aren't in alignment, then you're not going to do it. I value my health immensely, and it's not the top of my list. I would say that my kids are way up there, but let's face it, if my kids are way up there for my values, then I need to be healthy so I can serve them, right? So if they're sick, I still need to be healthy so I can continue to serve them. So I would invite people to, if you have a difficulty with compliance or finding a way to get better, take a moment and evaluate your values and see what ranks at the top of your list for those.
We are so lucky to have selected a profession that is, self-selecting for individuals that either are super sick and will do anything that we ask them to, or they are super healthy and they want to be superhuman, and they have selected themselves to go to a doctor to improve their health for real. Not just this, I'm going to take a medication and then I'm done. So, okay, so let's talk about some of the symptoms of someone that has a mutation in their MTHFR genes. What are some things that a person would experience if they have symptoms of undermethylation?
Well, undermethylation is a term where it's a little bit, I'm not going to say fingernails on chalkboard, but for me it's a bit close. For symptoms, if someone has MTHFR, again, you could have the MTHFR SNP or mutation or whatever you want to call it, polymorphism variants, and be totally fine, absolutely fine. And in fact, if you look at studies, they looked at neural tube defects, the prevalence of neural tube defects in Americans, Italians, Chinese, and Hispanics, and they were pretty high in mothers who had MTHFR 677, and that's pretty significant finding. But if you fly over to Europe, they looked at the Italians, who also have a very high prevalence of MTHFR, but they did not have neural tube defects. So you're thinking, well, wait a minute. And when I read that study years and years ago, I was blown away. It's like these people have MTHFR C677 homozygous, significant, meaning that their MTHFR gene is reduced to capacity by 70% or so, depending on the studies that you look at. Yet they still have babies with no neural tube defects, but here in America, they have the same genetic problem exactly, but they have babies with no tube defects. That comes down to environment, folks. I mean, it's really that simple. But I will say what MTHFR will do, I'm not going to evade the question, because it is a significant finding, 100% significant finding. If you find out that you have MTHFR variant like I personally do, my MTHFR is also significantly reduced by 70%. My life was affected. I had high blood pressure as a 18-year-old. My blood pressure was like 155/90, and I was trying to make the rowing team at the University of Washington, and the trainer was like, they were shocked. They were like, did you just drink a ton of caffeine, or what's going on with you?
Did you say, oh, it's hereditary?
No, I was like, whatever, let's do it again, and so we did it again, and it was still high. And then it finally came down to like 145 over, like 85 or something, and then they okayed me. So my blood pressure was high. I was anxious. I would perform well in school in terms of being focused and alert, but I would have test anxiety. And MTHFR slows your methylation down, so my dopamine was a bit trapped. I was very reactive to chemicals and smells. And I also had some glutathione SNP problems too, but it's with my MTHFR slow, my homocysteine was probably high. I never checked it as a kid. I don't think my parents ever did either. But if your homocysteine starts climbing, which is what something can happen with your MTHFR, then you can get a whole myriad of things. I mean, you name it, you got it. Cardiovascular disease is a big one, but you'll have a myriad of neurological symptoms as well. Any type of mood disorder, doesn't matter, and they'll vary. They won't be the same. You'll kind of go from manic, you may be bipolar-ish, but they'll just move around. It's not just one. It's not like sadness or you're depressed or anxious. It can be a total many of them. And there can be, if you're a mother and trying to have kids, your baby could have a congenital heart defect or a midline defect or tongue tie or more susceptible autism. I mean, it's just tons of things.
And even if you have this MTHFR 677, it's not a death sentence, or it's not, you're not confined to live a miserable life for the rest of your life. There are steps that you can do because, the way I see it, your genes are the blueprint to make the house. But that blueprint can be built by an expert builder or by someone, like a discount builder. And that house is going to be completely different depending on what infrastructure and what materials you're putting into your house.
That's a great example. And how many of us, Guillermo, actually have a map of ourselves? I mean, we're born, we're put on this planet, and we read all these diet books. It's like, oh, I'm going to try paleo, I'm going to try keto. You try Mediterranean. And they might work for a little bit, but they start failing you. And no one really has a map telling you, eat this diet or do this. And I really believe that Dirty Genes is a semblance of a map for an individual to really dial down to understand how their body works in multiple ways and how it gets broken or becomes problematic, and then how you can restore it in a strategic, directed way. And it's the closest thing to a map that I think anyone can have. And that, I think, is serving a ton of people, which is why there's so much excitement about Dirty Genes, because we get lost in the weeds listening to these 1-minute sound bites off of the news or all these doctor shows, or, we hear these amazing points on podcasts like, yours, which are phenomenal. But at the end of the day, we still need to understand kind of a soup to nuts approach of how we uniquely are built. And that's what Dirty Genes does.
So how, let's talk about your book. I've read, I'm like 3/4 on with the book, and I love how you explain, the dirty genes and how to clean them. So can you give us like a little overview on how to use your book?
Well, you use the book as a guide, first of all. It's not a book that you cozy up next to the fire on a Friday evening and think you're going to be all relaxed. It's a journey, and you're journeying through how your body works. And if you're a curious type and you've been struggling with all these symptoms and you're trying this, trying that, and you're tuning in all these podcasts trying to learn nuggets, you'll love Dirty Genes. Absolutely love it. If you're the type of person who doesn't really want to know things, how things work, you just want to, just go through life, then it's probably not for you. But I still think that these individuals would enjoy the read because it's, lighthearted and entertaining in places as well. But how Dirty Genes serves you is I picked 7 genes out of 19,000. Okay. So how do you pick 7 genes out of 19,000 to put in a book? Well, that was a daunting task I had, and I narrowed it down pretty quickly. First of all, there had to be a lot of research available for these particular genes, tons of research. And then they had to be very, very common in the population, like super common in the population. And they had to contribute towards increased susceptibilities to multiple symptoms that people have and problems and diseases that people have. And they had to be modifiable, meaning that I could help people improve them. And they also had to be identifiable if they are a problem through simple quiz questions and walking through these people. So there was, out of all the 19,000, I picked these 7 because I could do all of that with these genes. And you don't need genetic testing. You don't need expensive lab testing. And you don't need to run to your doctor right away with this book. In fact, this book is going to help reduce the waiting lines in medicine because people are going to be reading this book with a number of symptoms, and the symptoms are going to go away. I mean, because they're going to have an understanding of how their body works. And so how you do this is by quizzes. you first take these quizzes, and these quizzes are targeted for specific genes. And when you take these quizzes, the more boxes you check, the dirtier your gene is. And the dirtier the gene is, it means more work you have to do. And what I mean by dirty gene is simply a dirty gene is a gene that's not functioning optimally. I mean, that's it. It's not as functioning as well as you want it to be functioning. And it could be completely misfiring and sound asleep and not doing anything. So that's extremely dirty. Or it could be just, you filled your glass with water and you drank it, and now you put the glass back on the counter. It just needs a bit of a rinse around the rim, right, where you put your mouth, and that's it. So it all depends. But for most degrees of people, the book has something for them to help out. And if you're super ill, the book will get you started, and then there's a bunch of labs that you can look at with your doctor in the back. I'm not saying that this book is going to cure everyone, far from, but this book is going to put you in the right direction, because every one of these genes affect a major body system. And so by the time you're done working through each one of the genes as described in Dirty Genes, you basically hit every body system. So overall, you're cleaning all your genes, not just the 7. So, and then you can take these labs if you're still stuck with your doctor and say, doc, these labs look like, I'm just kind of stuck here. This gene's super dirty. My nitric oxide synthase genes are wrecked.
I was about to mention NOS3.
Yeah, well, let's do it.
Okay, so one of my most absolutely favorite things about your book is the explanation of why your genes might be dirty. In the case of NOS3, could you explain to my audience why your body decided to make a faulty gene?
Well, NOS3, first off, we have to go back. Homo sapiens have been on this planet for a long time, right? A long time. So 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, we were all hunters. Some of us were gatherers, but we all had to hunt something. And if we didn't have animals to hunt, then we're hunting nuts and seeds and vegetables and fruits. And so we made our way through life doing these things. We also had to fight infections. Infections are what killed us back in the day. We didn't live to ripe old ages. We got killed either by starvation or animals or sicknesses, or we fell off of something and killed ourselves, or someone killed us. So with nitric oxide synthase, I don't know if I share this in the book or not. There's a compound that feeds into this gene. It's called arginine. And arginine is a very, very important amino acid that you get from your protein. And what arginine does is a plethora of things in your body. And one of them is it supports your nitric oxide synthase 3 gene, your NOS3 gene, which supports your cardiovascular system and your blood flow. It's super important. And so check in with your hands right now. Are your hands warm or are they cold? Okay, so if your hands are cold, then your nitric oxide synthase 3 gene is not kicking off as well as it should be. And my hands are pretty warm. And when you're talking, though, you're not breathing properly. So breathing is super important for your nitric oxide synthase gene. So make sure you do nose breathing, not mouth breathing for nitric oxide. So that's Patrick McEwen's work, The Oxygen Advantage. But if you are born with a dirty NOS3 gene, the nitric oxide synthase 3 gene, if you're born with a dirty NOS3, meaning that you get your genetic test back and it's NOS3++, there could be some evolutionary benefit to that because it's been passed on to us. So then you step back and think, well, why would I want a weakened cardiovascular blood flow? Why would I want to inherit that? Well, because you're conserving arginine, so it can go to nitric oxide synthase 1 or nitric oxide synthase 2. And nitric oxide synthase 1 responds to infections. So then you have more arginine to respond to infections and kill them. So that could be one of them. It's hypothetical. I don't know if it's been researched or not. But if you look up the arginine steal in research, I do believe they talk about that. And so if you have a slower nitric oxide synthase 3 gene, NOS3, then it will not use as much arginine, and it will save some arginine for other things in the body. Now, for example, if trying to think of something in that if you are personally consuming a lot of things. Like, say all your energy is spent towards listening to podcasts in the morning, and you just are brain dead after listening to Guillermo and I's interview this morning, and now you got to go on through the rest of your day. Okay, if you just shot all your neurotransmitter focus on this podcast, you're not going to be as effective later throughout the day. So you have to pick what you focus on because you can't be at 100% all day long, right? You're going to wane. So I like to do my most productive things in the morning that require the most attention. So like right now, first thing I did this morning was look over some personal growth stuff so I can build and enhance myself and then share my knowledge with you guys and with Guillermo. So the body does the same thing. It only has so much substrate and tools it can use. So NOS3 might be conserving our arginine.
And then there's other advantages, and you talk about proliferation of arteries and veins, so it could be a little bit protective towards cancer.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, so it's like it's mind-blowing how we think that we are smarter than this millions of years of evolution, and we think that, oh, okay, so I have a lousy MTHFR or NOS3, I'm doomed. No, there's a reason these things are going on. You just need to, just like the ADHD kid who can't concentrate to learn plays, how do we utilize your tools to make you superhuman? Because everyone has advantages and disadvantages when it comes to your genetics, when it comes to the way you were brought up, your traditions, and there's a reason why we have developed this over thousands and thousands of years. Let's utilize your assets in the best way possible for the betterment of your family, for the betterment of yourself, of the community. You are not tied, you are tied to these genes, but this is not a death sentence. This is not a sick sentence. Let's utilize this information to make you a better human. And I think that's like the greatest message from this book, because I really dislike when people show up with a 23andMe and all of their genes, and they're like, I'm sick and here's my information. And in reality, let's focus on the basics. Let's utilize this information as a tool, and then let's plan for you to take advantage of your advantages and try to minimize the disadvantages to make you superhuman. And in this book, it's exactly that. It's the map to help you do that, and that's fantastic.
It was a lot of fun. It was really hard to write. About the genes themselves, that was easy to write. The program in which to clean them up, the fundamental program was pretty easy. The soak and scrub, that was pretty straightforward. The spot cleaning got a bit trickier. And the spot cleaning section, after you do the basics, you're like, God, you telling me that this book is just going to tell me that the basics in life are how I fix all my genes, and so I just need to exercise, eat and sleep right, and drink filtered water, and yada yada. Well, yeah, I'm telling you to do that for sure, and I'm proving it at a scientific level, specific to certain genes. Yes, but I take it further than that, because that would be, I could have stopped there, and people would have still loved the book, but I pushed the envelope. And pushing that envelope is where the book got tricky to write, because now, for when you get the book, you take what's called laundry list 1, and you score off how dirty your genes are, and then you go through the soak and scrub, which is the fundamentals of life: mindset, air, food, water, environment, and so on, and your diet, and you work on all that for as long as you need to. The book says 2 weeks, but as long as you need to, and then there's a laundry list 2 where you score again. And there's even more questions there, and you're like, wow, I've improved a little bit, but my NOS3 gene is still pretty dirty, and my DAO gene is trashed, and my MTHFR gene, wow, you know what? I cleaned that one up pretty darn good. And my MOA gene, yeah, I nailed that one too. So there's a process in which you start cleaning these genes specifically. Okay, first you have to do a general cleanup. You cannot go and have a soccer game and sweat like a pig which that's such a stupid example.
Yeah, because pigs don't sweat.
Yeah, it's such a dumb example. So you go to a basketball game and you sweat like a horse after the Kentucky Derby. I grew up with horses, so I can see that.
They do sweat.
Yeah, they sweat hard. And so you take your shirt off and you can literally wring it out, right? So are you telling me you're going to just scrub the right arm sleeve and then put it in your closet? No, you're gonna wash the entire thing. And you might just throw it even on pre-wash or just quick cycle to wash the whole thing. But that's the soak and scrub. That's just a basic cleaning. Then you take the shirt out and you're like, wow, actually I got a tear here. You need to fix that, or I lost a button on this, or I need to soak out this grass stain or scrub out this grass stain. So anyway, it's more specific, and so the spot cleaning is very, very specific, and I tell you how to clean each particular gene. But this is where it gets tricky, is if your NOS3 gene is the dirtiest out of all the other genes that you scored on, the other 7, you're thinking, well, I need to clean that one first because it's the dirtiest. But that won't work. You can't clean your NOS3 gene first because all the other genes, Guillermo, impact the NOS3 gene. You have to clean up the other ones first. So it's pretty cool how that worked out. And so I'm not going to tell folks which gene they have to clean first in the book, but once I created that order, it was like, wow, this is actually really cool, and I was very pumped when it all came together.
And it's frustrating when you log in, or you go into a podcast, or you might go to a practitioner, and the practitioner gets lost in the in the trees for the forest. And they start, oh, you got to take this supplement for this, and this supplement for this, and this supplement for this, and without doing like a cleanup, like a soak, without getting your diet, the exercise, the sleep first, because that's how people end up, walking to our offices with 40 supplements.
Well, and let's hit that again real quickly. So if someone's taking a bunch of folic acid, either through processed foods or supplementation or their vitamin waters, their energy bars, right? It's pervasive. It's everywhere. And then they find out they have MTHFR, and they go to the doctor, and the doctor says take a bunch of methylfolate. Well, they might not experience anything because the folic acid is stuck to their folate transport genes. It's stuck to the receptors, and the methylfolate isn't getting anywhere. So now they're spending additional money on methylfolate, and now they have to even get up to 15 milligrams, which is, now they're paying $70, $80 a month on methylfolate. They're like, doc, I'm still not experiencing much. Well, you could have folic acid glomming onto your receptors and transport proteins. So I really encourage people to avoid things first. It's like the book Essentialism, right? It's such a great book where you clean out your closet and you do the same thing. Chapter 1 in Essentialism is you go in your closet. What's essential? What do you wear all the time? What's been sitting there for years and you just like, that's ugly. And you always push it. You always push that hanger to the side, right? Always. Get rid of it.
Take it to Goodwill.
Stop pushing it to the side. Stop taking energy to do that, and donate it to someone who will love it and wear it all the time. You don't have to hold on to things. And so avoid, purge, clean. And so avoidance is step 1. And that's free. It's free. And then when you take methylfolate, if you even need to, then you'll get a tremendous impact. And it will hit your folate receptors after it's being transported by your folate binding proteins. It will get into your cell and will turn on the lights. And you're like, whoa, this is what life's all about, right?
It's the age-old question of what should I eat to lose weight? And that question drives me bonkers. What can I add? What calories can I consume? What fuel can I get into my body so I can lose weight? It makes no sense. And by reframing that question to what can I avoid to lose weight? And all of a sudden that clicks, and just making that small change, that small frame of mind change, everything makes sense. So yeah, I agree 100%. Let's clean up. Then 90% of the population. The reason I have this podcast is to help people that cannot fly to Arizona to see me or Seattle to see you. I want to give all the tools to them, and if they do everything and they still don't feel 100%, then they can look for a practitioner that can help them and that speaks the same language. And that's the only way that we're going to fix this healthcare system. Self motivation, self responsibility, doing everything you can with the tools that you're given. And then, if you still need a practitioner, look for a practitioner, try different practitioners, and then we can get you to be that 100% health or that superhuman status. Dr. Lynch, super amazing. Thanks for this conversation. Where can people find you? Where can people buy your book? People all over the interwebs are talking about how there's no ShyCon this year. Are you going to have a ShyCon next year? And how can people get a hold of you?
You can get a hold of me at drbenlynch.com, and most of my information is there. And my YouTube channels and social medias are all always there. And I do Facebook Lives every Thursdays at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I might be a few minutes late, but I'll be there. And I try to be on time, but sometimes life does get in the way on these. But around 2 p.m. I will be there on Thursdays, which is a lot of fun. And I'm pretty active on Instagram as well, and starting on Twitter. But Dr. Ben Lynch, a lot of resources, YouTube videos, tons of information there, some great articles, courses. We're on Dr. Ben Lynch too if you want to get in deeper. If you want to take your genetics to another level, we have a program called Strategene, which takes your 23andMe, which dives really deep into stuff. And we have a Facebook group for support. Dirty Genes is sold anywhere and everywhere, and which is awesome. And I'm very, very excited about that. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookstores, libraries. So yeah, that's it. In terms of ShyCon, yeah, ShyCon is our annual practitioner conference that we had every year, and it was great. It is great, and very amazing community, and we had a lot of fun, and we dug deep. I mean, heads were hurting after these conferences. Because we're always pushing the envelope. This year we don't have it because my team has been working so hard on the Dirty Genes Summit, which was phenomenal. That kind of took the place of the conference. So the Dirty Genes Summit was exceptional, and so getting the book launched too. I didn't want to kill my team, Guillermo.
Well, they can just read your book and then that's it. They'll be superhuman. And then, if you buy the book and you fly to Austin in April, how can they get an autograph from you?
Austin in April. Oh, there's some conference, isn't there?
Yeah, PaleoFX. It's
that's right.
It's
that's
just
right.
the biggest ancestral paleo conference in the world. Just saying.
Yeah. God, I even forgot I was presenting there.
You're on the webpage, like on the front page. I think yours is the first picture.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a true honor. I love what they do, and yeah, it'll be great to present there. And I'm presenting at IMMH as well.
Cool.
I'm presenting at a few other conferences. I'm presenting at TACA, Talk About Curing Autism. So there's lots of places to find me. I don't know if we have an event yet on drbenlynch.com, but we will if we don't yet. And then you can see where I am, and I'll be also looking at the events page myself to see where I'm going.
No, PaleoFX, that's like my favorite conference of the year. I got to present there last year. It's fantastic. Keith and Michelle are amazing people, and you want to get Dr. Lynch to autograph your book, or you want to just say hi to me, I'll be there. It's going to be an amazing conference, and then hopefully AHS will have us this year again, because that's a cool conference.
That is a cool conference. That's a group. That's a cool group.
That's a very cool group. Dr. Lynch, thank you so much for coming on the show. Been waiting for this interview for a while. We have all your handles. We'll put all that on your notes, and I'll see you soon.